Okay, very good morning, Tuesday 12th of June. Hope everyone is well. Just going to have a recap of the main news items that you need to be aware of going into the session today and what to look out for going forwards. First things first, as you can see from the layout of my charts, you've got a mix of the different asset classes. The major currency pairs on the top left, euro-dollar cable, followed by gold on the top right. You've got the DAX, S&P in the center, and then oil and T-notes at the bottom. And what you can see here is a particular move in the currency markets. There's not been one single new headline, but the move coinciding with obviously UK and European participants stepping into the market. Did see a bit of dollar appreciation initially overnight in Asia, and obviously kind of a symbolic meeting more than anything between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. However, that dollar has quickly reversed that move, and the Dixie is under a bit of pressure. And consequently, both major pairs have just been rising here. Cable, as I'm speaking, just having a test up at pivot. There you go, just testing it now, which is just short 5 pips at the 134 level in the sterling cable futures. Euro-dollar already on the front foot above the 118 handle. Just looking where we are at the moment, then the high prints that we're seeing from around yesterday's session would be kind of up in towards some resistance on the 118.18, the R1 level on the intraday. As I said, not one single catalyst for the renewed move as Europe's come in. And actually, if you look at the other asset classes, T-notes are pretty much locked in a very minimal range. S&P likewise, and in fact, yesterday's range in the S&P was equal to the second lowest so far in 2018. And so it's quite isolated this morning to the currency markets more specifically at this point. But elsewhere, with a little bit of softening in the dollar, perhaps that just helping as well. Crude oil just seeing some moderate upside, managing to get above this quite steep move that we had yesterday, which coincided with a couple of things. People looking at some headlines in regards to Nigeria and their Bonny Light crude, some issues with a pipeline run by Shell. Looks to be ongoing situation that company's had specifically for a few weeks. Just breaking above that initial high and that of the Asia Pac session. And so oil also up about 40 cents this morning. Before I get into the thick of things though, just a quick reminder if you weren't aware. And this is an event which is happening this evening. It's called Bloomberg Live. This is part of if I just back it out, it's a speaker series of which Bloomberg are doing globally. So they're stopping in London, Amsterdam, New York, Tokyo, Frankfurt, and so on. And actually this evening they're in London, and it's an event called Futures Forward, talking about market psychology and investing. The reason why I'm particularly pointing this event out to your attention is because this is the agenda for the evening. It's an evening event, and you'll see that on the list of speakers, the illustrious list is our own managing director, Will DeLucy. He's going to be a panelist later on this evening. This is actually a free event, and it's held at the European headquarters of Bloomberg, just around the corner from the office in the city. Will's going to be appearing as a speaker at 6:40. But the event goes on throughout the evening. I'm going to pop the link in the chat room. Any of those that are interested in coming along, then you just go on the link. There is a register button here in the top right. Feel free to join us. I'll be there as well. But it could be a good chance to just hear from a couple of speakers, Will included, as well as potential networking opportunities as well with other professionals. So I just thought I'd mention that it's going to be live on their telecast link as well as on YouTube Bloomberg Live if you want to have a look. Cracking on then, let's have a look at some of the stories that are coming out or have come out and are going to be in focus today. And this is one. Trump signs comprehensive document with Kim as summit ends. Leaders express optimism on peace between the US and North Korea. I did see some quite funny tweets talking about Justin Trudeau, the Canadian PM, deserves a place, or there's a place reserved for him in hell for just calling a press conference and retaliating for measures of which the US have imparted on them. And yet someone like Kim Jong-un obviously a bit of suspect background that the chap has, and we're best friends, let's shake hands, all smiles, everything's great, and there's peace and love in the world. So go figure. Kind of the state of play of things at the moment. But the important point here is that this is an incredibly symbolic event. Let's not, you've got to, I guess, hand it to Trump. You might question his method, but this is the first time ever that anyone's even drawn Kim Jong-un out of the country. Never mind, obviously he had that trip to China a few months ago, but to meet in person is a very landmark occasion, and certainly coming after that, well, let's say in place at the moment, peace agreement that's been actioned between North and South Korea. However, the important thing I think to note from this particular event is that although it's getting global press coverage and it's kind of the talking point, from a financial markets point of view, it's not that important. This is what I was talking about in the weekly strategy this morning. It really is inconsequential, I think, for global markets at this point. The fear of escalation of North Korea is kind of something which is dissipated at the tail end of 2017 now, after it reared its head at its peak of volatility in the summer of last year. I would say all this is just the two have met, they've shook hands, and they've continued to keep an open dialogue for future discussions, and that's it. So I wouldn't really look at this as a market catalyst for change in any way. I'd say this currency move, which has happened this morning, I wouldn't say it's so much anything to do with this story. This is just maybe a bit of order flow, combination with some technicals, but it's more just dollar weakness having strengthened a little bit overnight, and we've just seen that then lend its hand to support both major pairs on the upside this morning. One thing to be aware of, though, with the Trump administrative team is that you might have seen this overnight. Top White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow actually had a heart attack last night. He's said to be well, so hopefully he does make a full recovery. But I think it's just worth noting, given the fact that he is one of the senior advisors within the team, and particularly given the economic advisor role is such a pivotal one for Donald Trump. It'll be interesting to just see how they address this situation, i.e. is there a replacement, how long he's going to be out for, whether it's going to have any meaningful impact for the kind of tactical approach or the strategy of Trump going forward. Moving on, though, one thing just wanted to mention on the currency front was, obviously we've got the ECB interest rate decision happening on Thursday, and irrespective of my understanding was a blackout period, hasn't stopped some comments being leaked out in Austrian press this morning. The Kleine Zeitung, ECB member Evald Novotny views the situation in Italy with concern, but does not believe it will come to an actual crisis. So let me flip over. This is the article. He's been quoted in Austrian press. Now, this was going to be, or is going to be, likely one of the talking points, certainly from the Q&A session from the ECB presser, is going to be what's happening and unfolding in Italy politically, and to a slightly lesser degree in Spain. Is this going to have any meaningful impact for the ECB's plans of tightening policy through the form of outlaying details and the winding up of quantitative easing? Obviously, ending quantitative easing, or at least giving the nod to when specifically and how this is going to happen, that's a hawkish scenario. A risk to that being realised is if the ECB were to see Italian political situation maybe flaring up, some sort of contagion effect, and political uncertainty weakening then the argument for this hawkish turn in policy. What Evald Novotny is saying here is, no, that's not the case. So you could interpret this as hawkish. Is this moving the euro? Well, let's not forget that Novotny is Austrian, and Austria are aligned with the kind of German view in that sense. So typically do sit on the hawkish end of the spectrum. So I think it's worth contemplating, possibly with some of the moves this morning. I wouldn't pin it on it solely, but this is quite interesting to set the scene for the ECB meeting, in that he's saying And I think it's to be expected, being a hawk, that Italy's not going to be a concern, which is key, which would lend its hand to then the belief that the ECB can go ahead and start unveiling these details on the QE programme and how it's going to change over time. The other thing, of course, in focus, starting off from today, is Theresa May seeks compromise to head off Brexit rebels with hours to go. Brexit bill amendments to go to vote at 3 p.m. in London. That's the time. I've had a look, and you can do this just as a guideline. This is the UK official parliamentary website. Don't worry, you wouldn't really want to go on this for anything else other than finding some times. It's not the most exciting website I've ever seen. But there's a key section here on the homepage, which is called What's On. You can see that on the secondary tab here in the center. You click on that, and basically you can select your chamber or hall or room within the House of Commons or Lords, and you can see the full agenda for each specific day with a full parliamentary calendar with all the timestamps and everything that you need. So as you can see, they actually get underway at 11:30, but talking on a different subject matter. The actual consideration of the Lords amendments, day one. This is a 2-day event. That commences from 12:30, as I understand, but as the Bloomberg article suggests, the actual vote might not commence until 3 p.m. A couple of pointers here of what this is and what to expect from it. The UK Prime Minister has been warned by party whips that she faces possible defeats on 2 key votes at the hands of pro-European conservative rebels. Keep in mind, there's actually 14 amendments that's going to be heard at the moment and that were put forward by the House of Lords. If the Lords amendments are allowed to stand, the negotiating position of Theresa May will be undermined. So this is the risk, the negative risk that this event carries. The Prime Minister faces her first test today. MPs will vote on the Lords amendment that would put Parliament in the driving seat in the final stages of Brexit negotiations. Now this is the really big one of the 14, and I'm gonna put a link into the chat so you can see all the amendments. But the quote meaningful vote amendment, that's the one you've got to look out for. That would allow MPs to reject Theresa May's proposed Brexit deal and then vote on resolutions requiring the Prime Minister to return to Brussels to basically secure a specific outcome. So that's the big one today you've got to look out for. I would say the initial knee-jerk reaction, if that goes against the government, would be probably a negative one in the initial response at least, because it would create near-term uncertainty about the political leadership of this and also the timeframes of securing the negotiations successfully over time. However, any longer-lasting move, I'm not so sure, because then if this puts the hands back in and loosens the kind of strength of the delivery of a more aggressive hard Brexit, then that obviously can end up being a positive scenario. The second big vote actually comes tomorrow when MPs vote on an amendment requiring the government to report on its progress in negotiating membership of a customs union with the EU. And to put this into a bit of context, with a working majority of just 13, that's including the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, the DUP, Mrs May could theoretically lose a vote if only 7 Tories voted with the opposition parties. And so, obviously, this is incredibly tight, such as the very narrow working majority that May has presently in the lower house of Parliament. So, definitely needs to be watched throughout the day. When actually do the votes for the specific meaningful one that we're looking out for, the quote meaningful vote amendment, is unclear. I guess you're going to need to be a little bit flexible, just keeping an ear out on the squawk and so on and so forth. But I did put in the chat room earlier, and I have tweeted this last night. This is all the specific amendments. So it's actually 15, of which May's cabinet has agreed to one of the amendments already, but this outlines each specific one that's going to be heard. So some of them are kind of less market sensitive, I would say. So only the 2 really, the one on the meaningful vote, the one on whether Parliament gets a say on the deal, and the other one that's going to come tomorrow about the customs union, they're key. But if you wanted to get briefed on everything so you can pick your way through the the Brexit headlines today, then there's a link in the chat room. As I said, this move this morning, though, we have broke a little higher. One sec. Just have a look at cable on a bit of a wider perspective. This is a 90-minute chart, and actually, if you look where cable is at the moment, although we're coming up to what was the late evening high recovery, that's probably the first point on the upside that might carry a little bit of interest, just given some of these points here, just outlining on that resistance, which is sitting just above the 134 handle. But in the grander picture, this is a little bit mid-range, and also, of course, it carries a bit of tail risk of some headline noise just spiking up the volatility. And so I guess you just got to be a little bit cautious today. I guess the broader range, we start looking up towards cable, up around that just above R1, starts to look a little bit more interesting from the range of the last week. Could possibly be something to look at. I'm sure Sam will post some charts as well in the chat throughout the morning of interesting levels that he's looking at. He's the technical guru in that sense. Quick look then at the final things to be aware of, and this is calendar events. And today kicks off, well, actually yesterday did. If you remember, the industrial manufacturing production numbers out of the UK did knock the pound, as too did the trade balance figures from the UK. However, the move has since been recovered, but we have got quite a lot of economic data coming out of the UK, so brushing politics aside for a moment, there are things to consider, and today is one of those, because we get wage data, which is obviously very closely followed by the market, in a sense for forward kind of indicator of potential inflation in the future. If wages were to go up and start meaningfully moving and diverging across away from what has been falling prices, i.e. putting a little bit more money back in the consumer's pocket in that sense. Now, the average weekly earnings here are expected to remain unchanged, 2.6% from the previous reading. There is, though, quite a wide range of 2.4 to 2.9%. Same case with the ex-bonus numbers, slightly tighter, narrow range of 2.9 to 3.1. Just wanted to remind you something I commented on in the weekly strategy report yesterday, was comments out of Deutsche Bank. They did say at the weekend that there's potential upside surprise, given the fact that you've had the national living wage go up recently, and the filter through effect that this could have for these specific numbers for the month of June. And so be mindful of that, and also of any pre-release movement. Those who've traded long enough will know the pound tends to see what looks like a little bit of front running, whether you might see any buy the rumour, sell the fact type price action if the number is higher. Something to just be aware of 15 minutes before the release. This does then, again, to put in context for the week, we've got CPI tomorrow, UK retail sales on Thursday. So as I said, along with the politics, it's a big week for the economics for the UK and the sterling market. 10 o'clock then, you get German ZEW. This is one of the higher ranking numbers for the German economy. However, this is probably secondary to IFO. This is the economists and analysts forward-looking expectations, so a soft survey of forward-looking confidence and conditions of the economy and economic situation. Nonetheless, I would keep an eye out for that if you're trading any European assets. And then in the US session, a lot more interesting on the set events than it was yesterday, because today we've got US CPI. And if you look at the core CPI reading, the baseline consensus here from Wall Street is for a modest improvement to the upside to 2.2 from 2.1. We even got a range high of 2.3%. We start looking at the core reading. 2.2 obviously puts us right at the high that we've seen. This is why the Fed will be confident tomorrow night that they can pull the trigger on the second rate rise, whether or not they have the confidence and belief to go forward and increase interest rate hikes beyond that. I think is a bit of a stretch, but this argument definitely falls into supporting the view of tightening of policy, at least at the pace that they've outlined thus far. At 2.2%, if it comes in line, where does that put us? That puts us back to kind of late 2016, early 2017, I guess, before the kind of drop-off that we saw. Anything above that, 2.3%, means we're equaling up at about the highs we had in 2016. That means we'd probably be at the highest inflation rates in the US that you can see here, 2.3, 2.4%. It's a bit of a sweet spot for where it's peaked in both the financial crisis recovery high in 2012, a similar point in 2016. So if we start to get up to that point, does it start to heat up discussions about the possibility of additional rate hikes to temper rising inflation? We shall see. Back to the calendar, final things then, aside from the CPI reading, you've got API crude oil inventories. They'll be later on this evening after market. OPEC monthly report is coming out. There's no set time for this, but traditionally it does come out between really 11 to 1. The Squawk will point that out when the news headlines inform us of when specifically that will be. But just given the context of the looming OPEC meeting on the 22nd of June, with the fact that there's been a lot of OPEC oil minister comments of late, yesterday in particular, it seems to have just brought about some uncertainty on whether or not this 1 million supply increase is a done deal, as we may have thought last week, has been brought a little bit into question yesterday, and that's possibly helped oil see a little bit of recovery in its price more recently here, because we have seen a grind higher as we claw back some of those steep losses that we saw back at the beginning of the month. And we've managed to get our head above a fairly interesting range in oil. You can see here that kind of floor to the price activity in the late of May. If I just transition here, and then where we were as a point of resistance, we kind of consolidated and found a bit of a floor before the next push higher we've had this morning. So it seems like it's not completely a done deal for that meeting. So obviously keep an ear out for oil minister comments, but that OPEC report could be interesting, certainly for the supply side. What exactly have these specific countries been producing, and OPEC as a whole? The other things on the speaker slate, other than the UK House of Commons debate on the EU withdrawal bill, more Trump, Kim Jong-un love to be expected later on. As I said, not expecting any of this though to have a big repercussion on markets. And as we were kind of discussing yesterday, I think Trump not wanting to be too spread thin on two fronts, on the global trade, which he's under pressure from the G6 that we saw in Quebec at the end of last week, and so I'm expecting calm to remain in place for his talks face-to-face with Kim Jong-un for the rest of the day. From a Bank of England point of view, you have got Haldane, who is speaking as well at 2 p.m, so something else just to be aware of as well, as a tail risk event for any BOE commentary. Alright, going to leave it at that, and wish you guys a good day. As I said, I'm sure Sam will mark up some charts if there's anything immediately of interest, or for some key levels he's looking out for the day. So look out for those in Trading Live. Okay, thanks guys. Have a good day.